Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share a conversation I recently recorded with Eric Tyo. Eric is an Executive MBA format student in our Executive MBA class of 2020, and he and I recently caught up to talk a little bit more about his background, how he decided to pursue an MBA, what led him to Darden, and the steps he took as he managed the career transition process. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Eric Tyo. Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Brett, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
I appreciate you taking the time. So let's first check in and see how are you doing? How are things?
Yeah, I'm doing well right now with everything going on in the world. I'm pretty thankful that I was able to just start a new job and get settled into a new apartment and had done enough onboarding so that I could start working from home. So yeah, safe and sound here in the suburbs of Chicago.
Well, glad to hear you're doing well, and appreciate, as always, you're taking time out for the podcast. So for our listeners, tell us a little bit more about you. What's your background? How did you decide to pursue an MBA, and what are you doing currently?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and I was kind of the oddball sometimes in my cohort because I already have a PhD in physical chemistry. So I went straight through undergrad as a chemistry major and went right into a PhD program and finished that in 5 years of extra studies in physical chemistry, and then moved on to working as a research scientist at a national lab out here in the suburbs of Chicago. I'd done that for a number of years, was getting some really great results, some good research publications, but decided that I didn't really want my long-term kind of career output to be just writing papers. So it's great to be doing all of those studies, but I wanted to really see how I could take my talents and put them into the marketplace and see what real products, what real challenges I could overcome and ways I could change the world a little bit. So I moved on to a company called Johnson Matthey, where I was, for the last 5 years, I was working as a staff scientist designing catalytic converters, which are pollution control for cars and trucks. So from the very fundamental, what new materials could we put into them, all the way to working with some of the major automotive manufacturers to figure out, what are their main pain points, how do we sync in new systems and new technologies to really suit their new challenges that are coming up. But at a certain point, I was doing really interesting research, but I wanted to see what the next step for me career-wise really was going to be and how I could have a bit more of an impact on the world, on the work that was being done. And I also had a number of questions that were a little bit higher level on what sort of resources were we putting towards some of the different programs? How were we prioritizing the work that was being done? Some more of those enterprise perspective sort of questions that you would have about an organization. But unfortunately, at my position in the company, I didn't really have a lot of input on that. But also, I didn't have quite a well-rounded business background or understanding, yet a lot of people had just moved up from the sorts of roles I was in into those upper-level management positions. So I really kind of wanted to gain more of an understanding on your macroeconomics, just get a strong business acumen, if you will, to then be able to sit at the table and be an informed person and answer some of those questions and create strategy for different science organizations. So at that point, that's when I decided I wanted to go on to pursue an MBA. And at that point, I started looking around, checking to see what different programs I wanted to be a part of. And I'm not sure if you remember this, Brett, but I was really thinking of making a full career switch too, just thinking what the next course in my career journey was going to be. So I was applying to full-time residential programs. And if you remember, I think you must have gotten handed my application. In that process, someone thought that I was probably a better executive format student. So I got a phone call from you, I think, asking, are you interested in the executive formats? And that was something I didn't really know much about yet. So we had a really great conversation. You helped me understand really the value of an executive formats for me at the point that I was in my career versus doing one of the residential programs and kind of taking a full 2 years out of my career and being with a different cohort than the one that I was a part of. And I was really fortunate to be in the cohort that I was, made some really great friends and really have a much more mature network now coming out of this than maybe I would have had from residential. So I think for me, it was a really good fit. And then towards the end, I started thinking about, what that next step was going to be for me in my career, how I was going to move beyond just being the research chemist, which I was doing really impactful work, but I thought that I could use my talents and my skills to be a little bit more impactful in the world. But I was looking for a wide range of different opportunities, and I think as we discussed a little bit previously, I was looking into maybe something in finance would be interesting, maybe consulting, and I could have a role there, and then make my way up to a higher level director position at a major chemical or energy firm or somewhere like that. And as I was doing kind of this exploration, I went back and started networking with folks that I had worked with previously back at the National Lab, Argonne National Lab in the Chicago burbs. And I found out a little bit more about their business development office and how it's a little bit of a reverse business development, as most people would think. Instead of looking for technologies to bring in that we could sell, this laboratory that's funded by the Department of Energy, they have a rather large budget from the federal government to do real fundamental R&D, but you need to transition from that fundamental R&D to getting some of these great new technologies out to the marketplace. And so that's what this business development office is doing. They're finding ways to partner with some of the major US companies that are out there and find ways in which we can enhance their technologies. And then also, if the laboratory has developed a technology solely on its own, there's opportunities to license those technologies. So this new role that I'm in, I'm a business development executive at Argonne National Laboratory. I'm looking for ways to partner with different companies, looking for ways to take the technologies being created at the laboratory and bring them out into the market to make real economic changes through innovations that's being funded by the Department of Energy.
So much to talk about there. I do remember our earlier conversations where you were focused a little bit more on the residential full-time path, and obviously thrilled that you were open to considering the Executive MBA program, and I'm glad that it's been a good fit for you. So, what about Darden in particular resonated with you as you considered MBA programs? What led you to Darden specifically?
Darden, it has a great reputation and it has a very large alumni network that are two things that when you're first considering what programs you want to be a part of, those are very important aspects as well. The case method, because I think, learning experientially is something really important for me. So the case method is a really great way of learning for my particular personality, where you're having conversations with the rest of the students around you and really kind of thinking things loud instead of just normal recitation type lectures that are going on. So that was another really important draw for me. And I think also, even going back to kind of a bit of the personality of Darden, one of the slogans is "What's your why?" And I think a lot of the students that are there are looking for more than anything else ways in which they can help impact the world in figuring out what's really important to them. And I think that's a bit of the personality of Darden, and that was one of the other really important factors for me.
How did you, so you talked about making a career transition and coming to a business program because you wanted to make a career transition. It sounds like you were very open to many different paths as you embarked upon that. I'm curious about how you started to narrow, figure out what you're interested in and what you're not interested in. How did you start to narrow that list?
Yeah, so it was really great having a wide range of classmates. It's a very diverse cohort. So I got to talk to a lot of these classmates and get a feeling from them what they really like about what they're doing, what they're passionate about, how that connects with their job function, their role, their industry even. And also because I was very interested in just kind of an exploration, figuring out what the next phase of my career was going to be. I decided to apply for and become one of the Career Development Center class representatives. I figured that way I was going to be involved in everything as more of my responsibilities, pardon me. And it's almost like another class I was taking too. So going through that, I would sit through, and there was a number of different speakers that would come in. We had some online classes or representatives that would come in and talk about the companies that they're a part of, what they're doing, and then also just learning a little bit more through making phone calls to individuals and networking with the wider Darden alumni network, which was a really important part for me to do, to talk to people that had done either the residential or the executive MBA program, and then talk to them and find out what the opportunities are like, what their day-to-day really is like, and where their next career moves could potentially be too, to kind of look at that longer runway of what a career path in that area would look like for me.
So one of the courses that oftentimes comes up when people start talking about, oh, well, kind of figured out what my motivations were, or what my why is the professional advancement course. I wonder what role that course, led by Connie Dunlop, who's been on the podcast a couple times, I wonder how that course was helpful to you.
Yeah, that course was really helpful because it has you take a step back and introspectively look at yourself and what's important to you. That course, as well as with LO, we went through a couple of different personal assessments. And those personal assessments are really interesting because it helps you look in and understand subconsciously, what are your real values? Is it having a leadership position? Is it in the values for you in a position, in a job, I guess? Is it, being able to socialize with individuals? Is it intellectual challenge? Is it the financial security and rewards that come from things? And when you first start putting these things together and learning what's important to you, then you can flush out, instead of just what society maybe is telling you what's important, you can figure out really for yourself what's important. And also in Connie's class, she offers you the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation one-on-one, kind of a career counseling as well, and think of, where do you want to go? What's important to you? And I took her up on that offer, so that later on I was able to think through a little bit more on what is the most important thing to me, and do I want to continue to be a scientist and be involved in that? Is it more that I want to make my way up to the C-suite somewhere? And for me, at the very end, what I really realized was important to me is that intellectual challenge is something that I really thrive on and is important to me on the day-to-day basis. So making sure what I was doing felt challenging and also was making a greater impact in the world, and I was able to use kind of the skills that I'd gained through doing a PhD in the MBA was important, and not necessarily as much just going and working somewhere that was mainly financially motivated. What wasn't as important to me.
That all resonates across conversations that we've had here on the podcast as students have used that class to kind of drill down on their sort of motivations. And obviously you talked a lot about informational networking. How has the program changed your sense of what you feel like you're able to do, what you can do, that sense of personal efficacy that students report? It does seem to be enhanced over the 21 months. And I'm curious your thoughts about that.
That's a really great question. Confidence-wise, in many of these different conversations, I've gained greatly. My classmates they're VPs, they're CFOs, and after a while, just being a staff scientist, you don't necessarily know, am I going to be able to hang with everybody? Am I going to be a part of the conversation? Am I going to know what's really going on? So to taking the learnings that we gained and then being able to just keep with everyone through these classes was great to begin with on a confidence level. But then also learning a lot on strategy, learning the different frameworks that are out there and how to really start to structure some of your thought process was amazingly valuable and really important to then see how positives and negatives, things that had been done through the different cases in a wide range of different companies, and start to understand how important the right strategy is, and then how I can synthesize a strategy and move forward. We had some really great leadership classes, and that was important to me to really be able to see good examples of leadership in how, if anybody's mentioned this one before, Lynn Isabella's class on leadership, there's a really interesting topic where she talks about dropping your tools. And so as you go through a career, as you start moving on to a new position, sometimes those tools that made you really great at a previous position, you need to drop those tools and gain and create new tools for this next position you're in. And that really resonated with me a lot. Being a researcher in a scientific field, sometimes you'll see people that hold on to those tools of being that researcher when they're really high up in a management position, and maybe there's not great alignment in that point. So that was really important to me as a learning opportunity as well. And then I even took a few entrepreneurial classes. So now in the back of my head, I've got the thought of, well, maybe someday if you find that great technology that you really like and you think is passionate and could change the world, maybe that's the path to go down now too. Or it may not even just be doing a startup on my own, but a lot of companies nowadays, they're trying to diversify. They're taking up new opportunities in different markets, and having that entrepreneurial perspective would also be important in that regime too, to be able to try to stand up a new business unit within an existing company. So I think all of it was really important and really helpful for me to understanding more of my capabilities, increase my confidence, and understand how to be a leader too.
We are recording this in April, and we have students of our class of 2022 thinking about the start of school, and maybe some of our listeners out there thinking about submitting an application. You're someone that has obviously been to a fair amount of school prior to coming to Darden. You mentioned you had a PhD. However, I didn't hear you're saying I had taken a ton of business courses in a prior educational experience. How did that feel to you? To be embarking upon something that was new and different. Are there any things that you did to sort of help diminish that learning curve or feel a little bit more comfortable and confident as you started out?
Yeah, so I guess I've always just been a lifelong learner, and I've really enjoyed just picking up new things. And I've always been, throughout my career, trying to learn different things, whether it be on intellectual property or taking different short courses on leaderships that went through our universe, through the company I was at before. But yeah, to have a business background was not something I really had. It was all very much chemistry through and through. But I guess having enough of a math and analytical background situated me pretty well for that. But there was a large number of classmates that maybe didn't have that background yet. And so they refreshed on that a little bit. They maybe did a Coursera course or something like that. But in the process of getting ready for I took the GMAT as my entrance exam. I did have to go back through and learn a decent amount of that general math that maybe I didn't remember off the top of my head. I even took a GMAT prep course, which maybe isn't as much straight of a business basics course, but it was helpful to start getting my head around some of the math and some of the different business concepts that would be out there that I'd need to be dealing with throughout the course and throughout the program. So it wasn't too much of a challenge. The whole program is definitely very challenging, but it's more of an exciting challenge than something that I was very nervous about entering in.
So one of the things that people oftentimes ask is how do students do all this? Go to class, have full lives, work at the same time. I'm always curious how people approach the time management aspects of the program, how they manage the workload, the case reading. What was your approach?
Yeah, at the beginning, it was a big concern for me. That was sometimes the thought of why I was considering the residential instead of the executive program, or why the executive program hadn't even really, crossed my mind very much beforehand. With the how am I going to balance a full-time job, full-time classes, as well as attempting to have a social life. I don't have a family, so for me it was a little bit easier than some of my classmates, which I'm in awe of many of them. Mothers, full-time careers, taking on roles in our class offices and things like that. I'd like to say they're straight up rock stars in my book, and they seem to manage it pretty well. And for me, some of the tips and tricks that I took up was, learning how to read cases and really pull out the essence of them without getting into the minutia of the detail. Sometimes, I guess one of the professors early on, I think it was in LR1, even said they're helping train you to decipher the signal from the noise. Because if you become an executive, there's really no way you're going to be able to read every memo, every article, everything that comes across your desk. So it's almost a skill they're helping train you as to figure out when a lot of things are going on, how can you really start deciphering what's important, what's enough information for me to know to be able to make to be able to make an informed decision and be able to have an informed conversation, versus being a person that has to know everything in every little detail. There's definitely times when that's necessary, but it was good to sometimes, you learn, forged in the fire, and you learn for yourself what's necessary and what's not. I also had to make some changes in lifestyle and habits, and maybe, do some life hacks here and there at batch cooking, or, going out and finding a food service to do lunches with, and buy pre-made meals and things like that. So it's amazing sometimes, even if you shift your day a little bit, you gain a 5 or 10 minutes on your commute here or there. And suddenly when you add all of that time up, you've got another half hour or an hour a day that you didn't have before. So you become more efficient with your time. You realize that Friday night that used to be spent on the couch is probably going to be done with case reading. But after the first quarter or two, you kind of get into the rhythm. You realize, you can do it. It's not as tough as you thought it was going to be. Your confidence is up, and you learn kind of the program. You learn what you need to do to be successful and make it through. It's a marathon, not a sprint as well. So sometimes if you got to take that little break and go for a drive, go visit friends, something like that, it's also important to keep those relationships together too. We had a good number of topics would come up through classes like ultimate questions that I took, or leading with influence, where a lot of things was on, relationships and keeping family relationships. And it's interesting when you go to business school and you learn a lot more maybe about relationships and your communication skills than you do on macroeconomics and finance. But I think that's a testament to how well-rounded the program is. So although, yeah, definitely focus on the classes, the studies, things like that, there was also a big priority that a lot of the professors put, and the people on the staff at Darden put on making sure you take time to worry about and kind of keep your relationships together as well.
That's a great point. One of the things that students talk regularly about is the program forces you to prioritize, right? You have to figure out what your non-negotiables are, what's most important. You can't do everything. And so preserving those relationships, continuing to invest in those relationships, because nobody really gets through this program on their own. I'm curious, did you use a group or a learning team to help you manage some of the work, Eric?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, you're set up with a learning team, and it's really great because everything's so new, and it's kind of like you're drinking from a fire hose at the beginning. So having a couple of other people that you're checking in with and you're talking with is really great. And they also do a good job of looking and putting you together with a pretty diverse group, which will also help challenge you and get used to interacting and working in a diverse environment with diverse individuals too. So that was really helpful at the beginning. And then after a little while, because maybe you're not taking the same courses anymore, different people go on different trips, you're able to then form your own learning teams. And so I definitely did that. Started interacting with people that just casually became friends with, and it's also helped for a lot of the casework that you're doing. You can go through and start maybe sharing notes on things here and there, and kind of divide and conquer process there. Yeah, some of the other things too is just as having a social network. Oddly enough, I started chatting with my sister a little bit more. So I would just hop on for a 10, 15-minute phone call with her just to check in. And it's good to sometimes step away from the life of here's what my job is, here's what school is, but it's good to take that 10-minute, 15-minute pause once or twice a week to really do that and check in with other people on what's going on. So so internally within the program, I definitely had groups of people that I was going over some of the classwork with, and talking about, you're in this struggle together, and sometimes the camaraderie makes it a lot easier to go through. And then other times, it's great to just take a beat and step away and have that phone call with family members as the support network. And there's a lot of different teaming that goes on as well. I even had the CDC creates these team efforts, team challenges, if you will. And one of them I had on a LinkedIn profile challenge. So I just jumped in with two other classmates, and it was early in the program. I didn't really know them that well, but we all wanted to do this LinkedIn challenge. And it's great. Suddenly, now I've got these two other friends that maybe I wouldn't have, because one person was in a different cohort than I was in. Maybe I wouldn't have known him so well. And now, he and I have had a bunch of really good conversations about careers and hung out together. So some of those opportunities come up where you get to know your classmates through a different team or a project, and you get to really learn from them as well, what their outlook is and how maybe somebody from their background would tackle that challenge or look at something from a different perspective.
That's a great point. We are always telling prospective students that this is a transformational program, not a transactional program. And students who really thrive here are relational. They are going to take time to get to know their classmates because, again, as previously noted, no one gets through on their own. Most people are working with a group or two. And also, the best time you have to network with your classmates is while you're in school. So take the time, invest in the relationships now. You had mentioned being a career rep, which is one of the service opportunities available to students. I wonder how the career development team, we've had Jim Collins, Sarita Saltz here on the podcast talking about many different career-related topics. I'm wondering how they helped you as you navigated your career transition process.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic, and they were fantastically helpful as well. When I was thinking about going into consulting, I had some conversations with them, and Kellogg even had offered to do some case prep with me, and that would have been wonderful had I gone down that direction. I had a couple of really great conversations with Sarita. She was the person I initially interacted with and was kind of my career coach going through on anything from revising my resume, because a resume of a chemist looks a lot different than the resume of a business development executive. So that needed a lot of work. And then even during my interview process, I was considering, or I was asked to give a presentation, and it was kind of an open invitation. There wasn't a topic. And I even asked, is there a certain feel for the topic you like? And they said, no, just make it something you think would be relevant. So that wasn't necessarily the most helpful guidance, but so I reached out to Sarita, and once I kind of came up with what I thought my presentation was going to be for this interview, and I sat down and I talked it out with her, and sometimes you get into those conversations and it even gets a little confused or a little heated, but it's really great to have somebody else that has a lot of perspective to help you kind of see different ways of looking into it. And I guess also on that interview, this might be a little bit of an aside, but on that interview process, I had become such good friends with a couple of the individuals in my class that when I was trying to think of what kind of more of a broad and not super scientific presentation could I give, because it's going to be a broader audience, I gathered a number of my classmates and I said, I really could use your help. I've got this idea for presentation. And would you mind kind of being my trial run? Would you guys sit down and let me go over this presentation with you and give me your feedback? Be as blunt as possible. We'd all developed a lot of kind of trust within the group. In my first go around, they kind of looked at it and went, "Sounds really smart, but we don't really know. We don't really know what you're talking about there. And what are you trying to have people walk away as the message?" So kind of that little bit of a team as well was super helpful for me in my process of becoming of getting this new job. And but then back onto the CDC, it was really helpful as well. They do a ton of things personally for me as well as for the wider group, with a lot of different coaching and counseling and services. They'll go through and they'll talk to you about how to case interview and what the whole interview process is like for that. What else would they do? They hold a lot of things on, how to envision your career and job searching and things of that sort too, giving a lot of really helpful tips and PowerPoints and things like that. So just all that material that you could ever possibly imagine needing for a coaching and careers is you'll gain from them. And during the process, my brother-in-law actually was let go from a position that he was at, and suddenly I was taking all of the learning that I had gotten from Sarita and Jim and Kellogg, and suddenly I'm helping coach him through all of this. So it was really interesting how the process that I had been going through myself, suddenly I was able to take all the learnings I had gotten from the CDC and very quickly help impact my brother-in-law and help him A, feel more confident that he's going to find that next position, and B, I think it was helpful in getting him that next position as well.
No, that's great. And we do talk about the fact that they offer soup to nuts career support.
Yeah.
So everything from the very beginning, like what do you think you want to do, and that sort of self-reflection. And we had a podcast interview with them talking through the phases of the career transition process, which I recommend to any of our listeners who are just getting up to speed on the podcast. If you're curious about some of the sort of overarching themes and the resources and support they provide and the different steps along the career transition process, go back a few episodes, check out that conversation. So Eric, one last question for you here. Covered a lot of ground here talking about career transition and your experience at Darden, and how you managed that experience and even what led you here. I'm curious what you would share with prospective students. What advice or recommendations do you have for people who are listening to this podcast, either just beginning to think about an MBA or pretty actively considering Darden?
So I think really the quality of the whole cohort was fantastic for me. And maybe I was at a point in my career where, it was kind of becoming the day-to-day and it wasn't as engaging as I'd like. And the piece of advice or the comment that I'd really like to make is, as soon as I showed up, I felt super engaged. It was just amazing quality and caliber of people being brought in that are attracted to Darden, that it was like I really had a peer group all of a sudden. And it was a very wide group that, we didn't have very similar backgrounds, but we had similar motivations of what we wanted to do in the world and what we wanted out of our careers. And I've heard it from a couple of other classmates too, with everything that's going on right now today, some people just find it really comforting to come back to their peers from Darden and just have a quick conversation and, just check in with one another, because we've been through an interesting, unique experience together. But also we have similar outlooks and backgrounds and just a drive to do more than just kind of what's expected of you. So I guess the biggest piece of advice is to go through the whole process while you're in the program and make sure you're making those connections with all of your classmates. So one of my classmates here, since we've just finished up LR2 and we're somewhat saying our goodbyes here, is one person put out a note that said, the one regret that I have is I spent probably too many Friday nights in my hotel room trying to do the case readings because I hadn't done it ahead of time, and I hadn't gone out and socialized and really gotten to know everyone as well as I could. And don't just have one small group. Don't just stick with your learning team, because there's so many different people. It's a huge group, and there's still people I'm sure that I didn't get to know nearly as well as I should have. So get in there, be as engaged as possible, and get to know everyone, because that's really where most of the learnings come from, is from your cohort, from your classmates. A lot of the professors say that the great thing about teaching the executive program or the executive formats is that they learn a ton from the class discussions and from all the experts that are sitting there in the class that have been through these experiences themselves. So learn from your classmates, really. Take advantage of every opportunity that you can.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for taking time. I know it's always a busy time to start a new job, everything going on in the world. So appreciative of you taking time out of your day here for the podcast. Great as always to catch up. And obviously we're thrilled for you and your class of 2020 members. Sad to see you go, but man, it flies by from our vantage point, just from where you were when you were starting to now. May not feel that like it flew by for you, but it certainly feels that way for us. So congratulations.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, this is great. It really brings it all full circle for me, because right before LR1, as I was hopping in the car to drive down to Charlottesville from Philly, I loaded up on my podcast or on my phone a bunch of your podcasts to listen to and figure out what I had gotten myself into. And so I did the drive down, listened to all of this, thinking, oh gosh, this might be a lot. But so I'm super happy that maybe the next person in the next cohort getting ready to drive down this coming August will listen to this, and maybe it'll help them out a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, we always appreciate our podcast listeners. So that's great. I'm glad we could bring it full circle. So Eric, thank you again for your time, and stay safe out there. And, until we're able to see each other in person again, keep in touch.
Will do. I look forward to seeing you at some point here, so we can have a real celebration for the ending of this program.
Absolutely. And that was my conversation with Eric Tyo, second-year student in our Executive MBA class of 2020. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's ExecMBA, at darden.virginia.edu. And until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.